Hey there Summoners, how's it going? It feels like it's been a minute. My name is Nathan Ng and I'm here with 11.17 mid-patch update. If you're unfamiliar with the series, we follow up on the balance changes from the beginning of the patch and also update our 5 tier list for each role. Make sure you hit that sub button and let's go ahead and get started. First up, let's go ahead and talk about the top lane. 3 champions were touched this patch, not in the good way. Quarantine's been so long for me. Anyway, Irelia. Irelia is first and she received a small nerf to her Q's healing. The AD ratio was reduced by 4% at all ranks, taking a toll on both her powerful sustain in lane, as well as her clutch factor in the mid and late game teamfights. Although it's a bit early in the patch, data shows that her win rate hasn't really dropped by much. Again, the only thing that was touched was her sustain. She retains her high mobility as well as damage. Remember that one time that Riot actually nerfed 5 movement speed off Irelia thinking that it was going to do something? A small dip of a 0.5% definitely means the nerf has done its damage. In spite of this, Irelia remains a powerful pick, especially in the hands of an experienced player. Her ban rate still remains over 45% in high elo, and in spite of this, she still holds a spot as the 3rd most popular top laner. We'll be leaving her in the OP tier for now as a result. I know plenty of you get frustrated when playing against a pick like Irelia, and if you need help figuring out how to shut down these champions consistently, hit up a coach at ProGuides.com. They're the best of the best, and I'm sure that they can help you improve your matchup knowledge, decision making, and provide other insight that you might be missing out on. So, are you getting ganked in your own lane, constantly demolished? Well, ProGuides is here for you. Next are the Gangplank changes, which are supposed to shift his power evenly. However, things couldn't have gotten any worse. His win rate has dropped to 42% in high elo this patch. That is abysmal, and honestly sad considering the fact that his previous win rate was hovering around 46 to 47%. We're moving Gangplank down to the D tier for now, but I'm confident that Riot is going to reassess his current state and provide some fixes next patch. Ultimately, the early game nerfs have done a lot more damage than the late game buffs have helped him, and we moved him down to the D tier because of this. The change to his Q especially has significantly weakened his strength in the lane, as he can't make full use of Grasp of the Undying. Chances are he's been balanced heavily around the use of that keystone, but players will likely need to move on and find a new one soon. It's also worth noting that he's finding a lot more success in Korea, where in Masters and higher, his win rate is actually well above 50%. There's definitely a ton of necessary optimization left to do, but at the moment, he definitely feels pretty weak. Finally, there's Teemo, who received a small 3 damage buff on his ease on hit damage. Is he absolutely busted as a result? Like you probably expected, no, he's not quite there yet, and I hope he never gets there. The buff was small like him, but it had a huge effect considering how seemingly insignificant the change was. His high elo win rate is nearly at 50% as a result of this, and his overall win rate is up about a whole percent. Since Teemo is a huge lane bully, even a small 3 damage buff can do this, so don't take those small numbers for granted. You also have to think about what sort of champion is receiving the buff. We'll be leaving Teemo in the A tier for now. He remains a powerful low elo pick, and he's now a passable one in the higher elo. The final top lane change that we made is that we've added Jarvan to the C tier. He isn't that popular as a top laner, but he's seen a huge spike ever since his buffs. His power in the jungle has translated into some solo lane popularity because everybody loves flex picks. He's underperforming in the top lane though, so we've given him a rather low placement for now. In our top lane's OP tier, we have Tahm Kench, Camille, and Irelia. In the S tier, we have Riven, Mordekaiser, Fiora, Jax, Malphite, Wukong, Shen, Mundo, and Sett. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about the jungle where we have plenty of changes to review. First in the jungle was a nerf for Graves. He received an increased Q mana cost to lower his viability in solo lanes. Surprisingly, it's done a decent job of just that. His mid lane win rate has dropped a bit since the start of the patch. However, his jungle win rate hasn't fallen off in spite of this nerf, and we'll be leaving him in the A tier, so I guess it worked as intended. Kayn's blue form received a massive passive damage nerf this patch as well. His win rate remains above 50%, but it's dropped a little bit less than a whole percent. While his red form remains just as strong as before, his blue form isn't nearly as rewarding as before. Being able to decide your form based on playstyle and team comp is one of Kayn's strengths, but with the weaker blue form, part of that strength isn't as effective as before. We'll be leaving Kayn in the S tier, however. Viego is one of the most impacted champions of this patch. He received a ton of changes, attack range reduced, nerfs to his passive, and variety of other changes. So far his win rate is down about 3%. Now, there's definitely a need for a new build. Viego's crit scaling on his Q was increased, meaning that players should be incentivized to experiment. I'm sure that win rate will rise on its own, but he's definitely come out weaker, especially because of the attack range nerf. We moved Viego down to the A tier, but we'll continue to keep an eye on him. The other giant jungle change were for Amumu. We immediately moved him up to the S tier after seeing them, and we stand by it. Amumu's win rate is overall just sitting below 54%. Like usual, his win rate in silver and bronze is insane, sitting between 54 and 55%. As opposed to before, he's finally able to hold his own weight in high elo as well. His win rate in platinum and higher is up to 51%, a monumental improvement from his previous number at 48%. Giving Amumu 2 bandage tosses has done a lot for him at all levels of play. He has more crowd control and technically more mobility than before, as long as you have a target that you can bandage toss towards. While there are a variety of other changes, the overall direction was a buff and the numbers easily reflect this. Before moving forward, let me ask you the question of the day. What's your favorite ability combo or synergy in the game? One of my favorites is Amumu's ultimate paired with Ziggs's. The radiuses are nearly identical, and the damage practically guarantees a victorious fight. Let me know your answers in the comments down below. I'm expecting to see a lot of Yasuo ones. Next is Echo, who received an increased passive damage against monsters. His win rate is up about a whole % this patch, but will be leaving his placement untouched. Finally, Evelynn received a huge reduction to her ultimate's level 1 cooldown. Her win rate has risen a percentage and a half as a result. This buff means that she either wins harder than before, or that she's safer when behind. Evelynn can also use the ability to defensively get out of sticky situations, but the long cooldown makes this punishing on the player. Its previous longer cooldown also meant it was often unavailable for this sort of use. Evelynn will remain in the A tier, but is definitely in a better spot after the change. Our OP jungle picks are now Lee Sin, Shaco, and Jarvan. We moved Jarvan up to reflect his incredible success for the past couple of patches. Following his buff, Jarvan has been popping off as a result of the massive damage. This was also a consecutive buff to the defensive one that he received earlier this season. As a result, he's definitely on the stronger side, and even though his ban rate is low, he holds an impressive win rate as well as play rate to back it up. In the S tier, we have Elise, Fiddlesticks, Zac, Kindred, Kayn, Kha'Zix, Nocturne, Xin Zhao, and Amumu. A final note is that if you're in the high elo, you shouldn't be sleeping on Nidalee. She's doing really well at the moment, and she did receive a minor buff back in patch 11.15. Next, we have the mid lane. To the joy of many mid laners, Zed was nerfed this patch. His Q's damage was increased, but in return his E's damage was lowered and now requires more skill to play. You need to be better than before essentially, and this was a skill check. In spite of that, Zed remains at the top of the mid lane tier list. Both his win rate and ban rate remain nearly identical to last patch, meaning that the nerf wasn't big enough. Zed players are actually really good at landing their Q, or a bit of both. If you main Zed, I hope that you can land your primary ability at least, but I'm surprised how little these nerfs have affected Zed, especially since his ultimate's late game cooldown was also increased. I guess everybody is just insane on this champion. Next, we have Uxin. While his E was nerfed to combat the power of the E max Uxin, he's still popping off. Uxin received a variety of bug fixes as well as a major nerf to his scoundrel effect on his W. The bug fixes did a lot more good than the other nerfs hurt him, and Uxin has continued to steadily climb the ranks. We moved him up to the OP tier. His high damage, mobility, and even utility make him a great all-around pick. An all-arounder is a bit of an understatement because Uxin is pretty good at everything. He received basically nothing but buffs since his release, and his W wasn't even hit that hard. Although killing enemies beyond the grave does happen, it's not the norm. The final buff was a small one for Lissandra, increasing her base AD and lowering her Q's mana cost. Her overall win rate is up an insignificant amount this patch and will leave her placement untouched. Our OP mid lane picks are Zed, Yasuo, and Uxin, followed up by Sylas, Talon, Annie, Fizz, Kiana, Diana, Ahri, Yone, LeBlanc, Kazan, Anivia, Vladimir, Katarina, Malzahar, Irelia, and Heimerdinger in the S tier. With the mid lane covered, let's go ahead and talk about the bottom lane next. We had a few changes in the bottom lane this patch. Let's start off with Xayah. Her win rate has gone up another % after the huge quality of life buff that she received. Now that her Q's cast time scales with attack speed, she's a more reliable carry during teamfights. The ultimate damage buff was a lot more straightforward one that makes her more potent in combat, especially at level 6 when she wants to look for an explosive fight off of the power spike. We're satisfied with the current placement and still think that her win rate will continue to go up as the patch plays out. Bottom lane Senna was in a rough patch for quite a while. In this patch, she received a plethora of changes, most notably increasing the scaling and a better crit scaling ratio. As a result, her win rate has increased by 3% this patch, and while we left her in the B tier, she's close to pushing towards the A tier after this change. The biggest bottom lane change this patch was for Lucian. He received plenty of changes, most notably the one to his passive, to push him towards a duo lane and away from the solo lanes. There's no doubt that the changes hit their mark, and hopefully he does too, because that's where his buff is at. His solo lane win rates have plummeted, and his bottom lane win rate has improved drastically. It's already gone up 2%, and I expect this number to continue to go up until the next patch. We expect players to continue adapting and improving in response to the changes. On top of this, support players will develop a better understanding of Lucian's dual lane strength and adapt to his newfound power. We moved him up to the A tier and will continue to keep an eye on him. We have one adjustment to make. Ashe is back in the OP tier. Although our analysts expected the Wits End nerf to hurt her significantly, Ashe remains a top tier pick in spite of some lost damage. While in previous patches players were split between the first item Shield Bow or Wits End, the majority of them now rush Shield Bow, since Wits End isn't nearly as powerful as it was early on. After this small adjustment, her power scaling remains similar to before, and for a lot of players, it's almost as if nothing has changed. Our OP bot laners are Samira, Ziggs, and Ashe, followed up by Ezreal, Vayne, Jhin, Tristana, Draven, and Kog'Maw in the S tier. Finally, let's wrap up with the supports. Although Leona was nerfed, she's still too strong. Leona is slightly less tankier than before, but continues to dominate the bottom lane with her high damage and oppressive crowd control. Get hit once and you're probably dead, and that's just how it is when playing against her. Leona's win rate is still ridiculously high at 24% in high elo. She's still in the OP tier, and for good reason. The last change was for Nami this patch. Want to guess how she's doing? Great, actually. Her win rate went up a whole %, and as a result of some extra health and more importantly, a lower mana cost on her W. That ability is so strong in lane, it's actually ridiculous. This pick has made Nami a solid pick in mid-elo, from around silver all the way to platinum and even low diamond. Nami's oppressive laning phase makes her a great solo queue pick, since oftentimes players go for every tried and true strategy of win lane, win game. Like our analyst mentioned at the beginning of the patch, Nami and Lucian are an impressive bot lane duo, holding a 53% win rate together. Not bad, especially considering that Lucian's solo win rate is around 49% at the moment. Admittedly, Nami does fall off a bit in the late game as her utility isn't as impactful. However, players who tend to end games quickly can abuse Nami in her current state, especially when duo queuing with the bot lane buddy. Imagine having friends. Our OP picks are still Leona, Lulu, and Sona, followed up by Blitzcrank, Thresh, Morgana, Nautilus, Maokai, Zarya, Senna, and Yuumi in the S tier. That concludes our mid-patch update for patch 11.17. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments down below. Also, make sure to check out the description to join our Discord. I'd love to see you guys there. I wish you guys the best of luck for the remainder of the patch, and I'll catch you guys all in our next video. And until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.